Nightfall here in the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia, Ebenezer Baptist Church. We're here in the Horizon Sanctuary of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, and we've started some provocative discussions and talking about and looking at ourselves, the media, and how we cover athletes, especially when they start to get into trouble. And we have a graphic that will really illustrate that. And to see, and we asked people, and we asked 1 being the kindest, 5 being the harshest, how athletes were treated. And you can see all 5 of these athletes have had issues. And you can see that Ben Roethlisberger was treated the kindest. And at the bottom, Michael Vick was treated the harshest. And you see the others in between. Marion.
How did I know you were going to come?
I know, you know, you what? But it is a story of redemption as well, and how you've gone and you've spoken. But you know what has been said about you and the things that you've had to endure. How do you believe that you have been treated by the media?
Well, I'll be honest with you,
please,
Robin. I think that I can remember when I was a little girl and I wanted so bad, Robin, to be famous. For me, growing up, to have your name on your shoe was the epitome, was success. And I tell young people now, be careful what you wish for. Because as much as you want the fame, as much as you want your name in the papers and on television when you're successful, you have to accept the responsibility that when you don't do the right thing, your name is going to be on the front page of the paper. And I think athletes nowadays need to understand that that's how it is. You are fair game. When you put yourself out there and you want the notoriety, you want the success, you want the fame. If you don't make the right decisions, if you make poor decisions, or if you just flat out do the wrong thing, you have to expect that the media is going to come down very hard on you. And in turn, because of the age we live in, with the internet, where a press release in 2 minutes can be worldwide, and that story is going to recycle every 24 hours, everybody's going to know. And so your image is going to be, it's going to be tainted, and it's going to be very, very difficult to turn it around again.
Do you think you've been treated fairly? And since, and now too, because before and after, do you think that the treatment has been fair?
I think I've been treated fairly. I think I have taken, I think what athletes need to do, you know, for so long, athletes need to understand that you know, the public sees us as heroes. A lot of times they see us as superhuman, and they lose sight of the fact that we are human and that we come into the situation with our own baggage. And because of that, sometimes we make poor decisions. And a big part of that is what you do. We talked earlier about the people whom you surround yourself with and how important that is. And ultimately, I think I have been judged fairly. I made poor decisions. You know, you paid the ultimate price, but as long as people are fair and they give me the chance, I have been given a second chance, and people realize that, okay, she made mistakes. Now, how has she turned her life around? How have I used my mistakes now to make the lives of people better? That's how I see it now.
And I know you've been very active in doing that all across the country. Michael, you and Tony get into it. It's great to hear you guys sometimes going toe to toe. And I know that the athletes, you're in the locker room, and this has been an issue. And you see the graphic that we put up about Ben Roethlisberger, all that he went through and what happened, and Michael Vick, the other end of it. So what's your take?
God, Robin, I have so many thoughts. To the person who emailed in or tweeted or something and said race is not a factor, just stop. Well, one of the things that Tony and I do, we are able, because there is a black person and a white person. We talk about race more than anybody on the network. People on the network are afraid to talk about it. People in whatever groups they are in are afraid to talk about it. Publicly, outwardly, honestly, frankly. But we're not. And again, we have the luxury of that thing. Ideas can be bounced off each other. Race is a factor in everything. In everything. It's a factor in everything I say and do. So is the fact that I'm from the Midwest as opposed to Tony being from New York. So is the fact that I'm a product of Jesuit education. So is the fact that, I mean, you can go on and on and on. All of these things shape my perspective. And race is at the top of that list most days, if not all of them. And so the storytelling, to quote a friend of ours, Ralph Wiley, the late Ralph Wiley, storytelling is told through a certain prism. And everything that you are impacts the way you tell that story. I mean, I have my biases. I know what they are. I try to admit them in print. And if you don't admit them, you wind up just covering them, and you don't see things the way you should see them. People in our business should bounce ideas off. Jalen and I get to sit together a lot of days. And it's not that I will necessarily be asking him for something to quote him about. It's perspective. What do you think of this? These ideas have to be bounced off one another every day if you're in the business of media particularly, or you are doing your viewers, readers, listeners, and yourself a gross disservice. And the ideas are not bounced off. And Dr. Lapchick presented those numbers. I'm not just that worried about the numbers. I want to know what the conversations are. What are people's exposures like? What are you exposed to on a daily basis? And I think all of those questions are open for discussion when we look at those athletes and try to figure out how they were treated as they were. Some of the Michael Vick stuff infuriated me. Michael Vick, were he a white athlete, would have still been in big trouble, but he would not have been treated as a leper before given a second chance, even while given a second chance.
And you think that is based on race? You think that is because...
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you
again,
something. A factor. It doesn't mean every person who criticizes Michael Vick is a bigot. And people, that's where people get scared. You say, wait a minute, race is a factor. Oh my God, I'm not a racist. That wasn't up for discussion. The discussion is, how did you get to this point? Why do you feel about this issue the way you feel about it? And if people are honest with themselves and not so damn afraid all the time, then they will realize that race, gender, ethnicity, nationality, all of these things impact who we are every day, and the denial is killing us. And not just from a sports perspective, but the country in general.
Let me tell you something. This week, Michael, on Outside the Lines, we had Ashley Fox, the Philadelphia Inquirer, who reports on the Philadelphia Eagles. She was on the show. We were talking about Michael Vick and the fallout from the Eagles' elimination, etc. And she told us that that day at his locker, cleaning out his locker, Michael referred to himself as a co-MVP after the Eagle loss. Interesting, curious statement, perhaps. I tweeted it. I have never gotten a reaction as viral, in some ways as vicious, as immediate as anything I've ever put out there into cyberspace. People jumped on that Vic, in their minds, would have the temerity to call himself a co-MVP, thinking of himself, Spike, in the third person.
I would like to ask my man, Wilbon, you've been in the locker room. Can you talk about this dynamic where you look at basketball, the NFL, and NBA, when the majority of the players are brothers and the majority of the press are white? What is that dynamic in the locker room? Because these are the guys that are writing the story. You know, whatever they write, that's going to become
perception is
the
reality.
perception. I remember very quickly, Albert Bell was being vilified. It was with the Cleveland, and the Cleveland Indians were coming to Yankee Stadium, and for a big series. And this is where Albert Bell was really killing. And the Post was on his ass. And when they came, I mean, that was another indication of power to me, because the Yankee Stadium was never, ever, ever been on Albert Bell if not these articles been written about him. I don't know, it was Wally Matthews, something like that, but they were, and until we get some type of balance.
There's no question, Spike. I mean, that of course, the reason why when you ask me to come to Morehouse to speak, I just say, what time do you want me there? But let's take some accountability. I mean, we have to decide, is the only contribution we want to make through athletics?
True.
And before I go any further, I make a living and a good one covering athletics. So I don't want to sound like a hypocrite at all. I love sports and telling stories about sports and the people who play and coach and manage them. But, you know, we have granted a monopoly to the rest of the world on everything else except sports. And we have gotten to the point we don't value things that are intellectually important. Only, I mean, when people get older, they see the difference and they see the value in this. But at the time, what is it we value? We talk about, you know this position, you and I have talked about this for years. I want to see the NBA have a 3-year rule. Because you know what? Education didn't hurt David Robinson. Education didn't hurt Patrick Ewing. Education didn't hurt Michael Jordan, not Michael Jordan, who else went 4 years? Tim Duncan.
Landry Fields.
I can name Landry Fields at Stanford.
4 years Stanford.
So we now, again, this goes back to my point about we have created this position where education is an impediment to success. Who the hell else tries to sell that? We're the only people who try to sell that. And so what you get is you get people who don't value, and I don't mean athletes not value, I mean the culture, the subculture that we live in, not valuing other things. So I'm happy to talk to aspiring journalists of whatever color, but a special interest obviously among people of color who want to tell these stories. Everybody can't play it. If they did, I would have been playing earlier. but there are, the sports industry is an amazing industry. Do you know how often I run into a black team physician? About the same number that Dr. King would have run into. Maybe 1 or 2. You know how often I run into, until very recently, a black publicist, lead publicist for a team, or league. Do you know how often? Okay, these are the parts of, I mean, there's a huge pie out there, $1 trillion industry part of it. I went to locker rooms for years. There was no black college football coach to interview.
How many are now? How many?
9, 6,
14 to 16, I believe 16. Now, yeah.
16. I mean,
16 now?
16 FBS.
So to throw the question back at you, it's scary. I will tell this briefly. 13 years ago, so we're not talking prehistoric, even though I'm getting old, it's not that long ago. 13 years ago, Paul Tagliabue asked me to become a panelist for the Hall of Fame Committee in professional football. I was a little reluctant, but I thought, this is something I should do. He thought enough of my work to ask, I'm gonna do it. So I walked into the room on a Saturday morning to vote for Hall of Fame. There are 38 writers, I believe, in the room. I was the only brown one. In 1996. So again, we're talking about exposures and how these things are shaped. And if people don't think race is a factor in everything, they need to wake up.
Now, I understand what you're saying about sports, but compared to Hollywood...
Is it any different? Yeah.
Sports is way ahead.
All right.
Way ahead.
Well,
yeah, I believe you.
Hollywood is... Oh.
We take the present, we spin it towards the future. Next, as we continue, we're going to talk about sports for the decades. You know, we have seen a decided social impact, usually ahead of the popular curve. Can that continue as we are in the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, the Horizon Sanctuary? Come on back with us.